First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua Ba'ashem Rakakudash. Yahweh is who this world ignorantly calls God. Yahweh Shai is who this world ignorantly calls Jesus. Ba'ashem means in the name, Rakah means spirit, and Kodash means holy. And that's on the Paleo Hebrew. I also give double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me this truth. And today's video, I wanted to go into how America is Rome reincarnated. Okay, another back to the basics type of video, and the reason I'm making this video is because, I just got done watching the UFC 250, right, which is UFC fight, and essentially they were holding this in the White House, and not UFC 250, but Whitehouse 250, that's what it was. So they were holding a massive, fight over there in the White House. Trump was there. All these, big athletes were fighting. Stacked card, I can't lie. It was entertaining, but, that's the point, is that it's entertaining. And why is this, at the White House? And the answer is, it goes back to ancient Rome. Right? This is the exact same thing they were doing in the ancient Greco-Roman times. And it was called bread and circuses. So I searched up bread and circuses Rome, and it says panem et circenses is a famous political concept from ancient Rome. Coined by the Roman poet Juvenal around 100 CE, it described the Roman government strategy of placating the masses by providing free basic food, grain, and lavish entertainment such as gladiator fights and chariot races. And that's the same thing you see today. It's just that instead of free food, it's essentially free. With your fast food, your DoorDash, it's essentially free compared to, what it used to be anciently. And, the fact that you have to actually work for your food, now at the click of a button, you could have someone running over here, to bring you a McDouble, a McRib. But, fast food and sports 24/7. You got the baseball season, and then you got the basketball season, and then now you got, soccer season with the World Cup. And, I'm not saying I don't watch these sports. It's still entertaining. You got to find your balance. But it's the point that, why is this being employed? Okay. That's the important thing, is what is this entertainment, distracting you from? So it says the strategy. Roman politicians and emperors used this system to keep a growing, volatile urban populace happy. By trading away their political power and historic civic duties, the restless Roman mob could be easily controlled, pacified, and distracted from deeper political or societal issues. And that's the point, is that all these bread and circuses, they're so good, they're so nice, that it distracts you from the real problems. Right? You're being sedated, you're being drugged, and a lot of people don't even notice it. So, it's the same thing today. Gladiator fights at the White House, okay, literally the place of the president. So I wanted to ask the ChatGPT a question. I wanted to ask it, or I could ask Google. Let's ask it, where does America political system come from? Right. So it says Enlightenment philosophy. When you go deeper into it, let's ask it, does it go back to Roman times? Yes, the American political system directly traces many of its core structures and ideals back to the Roman Republic. The founding fathers were deeply educated in classical history and consciously modeled the new nation after Rome's early representative government rather than ancient Greece direct democracy, right? And we can read about this in First Maccabees, or in the book of Maccabees, not First Maccabees, going into how they developed a Senate house. First Maccabees 8:15, it says, moreover, how they had made for themselves a Senate house, wherein 320 men sat in council daily, consulting a way for the people, to the end they might be well ordered, and that they committed their government to one man every year, who ruled over all their country, and that all were obedient to that one man, and that there was neither envy nor emulation among them. Right? So the Senate, right, and then electing the one man, which back then they were called Caesars, and now they are called presidents. Okay, so it's the same structure. And the reason it's the same structure is because it's the same people in power. Okay, it's the Edomites. And I'm gonna, show a little bit of the architecture of the Edomites back when, they're in their main habitation, Petra Jordan, and show you the symbolisms or the comparisons that we have today with the architecture here, specifically, the White House. But it says the Republic, Rome pioneered a res publica, public affair, where citizens elect representatives to rule on their behalf instead of a monarch. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, takes its exact name and role as a deliberative, senior legislative body from the Roman Senate. Rome utilized the mixed government balancing the consuls, executive, Senate, patrician, legislature, and assembly's democratic element to prevent tyranny. Checks and balances, Rome tribunes held veto power, meaning I forbid in Latin, which directly inspired the modern presidential veto. The Roman 12 Tables established that laws must be written down and applied to all citizens, a precursor to the U.S. Constitution, and the founders idolized Roman figures like Cincinnatus, who willingly gave up absolute power to return to farming, inspiring George Washington's surrender of his military command. So, what you see is a bunch of comparisons. And like I said, it all goes back to because it's the same people in power, okay, the Edomites, which when you go into one of their habitations, like I said, it was Petra Jordan. So if you search up Petra, it says, the Edomites were an ancient Semitic-speaking people who inhabited the mountainous region of Edom in southern Jordan, encompassing the area of modern-day Petra. So let's see what that city looked like. And lo and behold, the classic pillars and the triangle on top. If I were to show you a picture and I'd, run it through the AI and make these pillars white, you would tell me this is the White House. But it is Petra Jordan, okay? It's Petra Jordan. So when you look at history, no other lineage built like this outside of the Edomites. Not the Chinese, not the Arabs, only the so-called white man. And that is one of the identifiers of who they are, right? The way they build. Also, if you look specifically on one of these pictures, you can also see the eagle, right? Which the eagle is part of, these Edomites. They pride themselves, with that animal, the highest flying bird. So, let's search up White House. What do you see? Same thing, pillars and the triangle up top. Same as the Greeks and the Romans, because the Greeks and the Romans were Edomites. And I'd have to look, search up the eagle, and it'll probably pop up. But another thing you can find is if you search up Edomites statues, or you'll find some of these. But I remember it was and this was, the so-called made-up god. It was I think it was this one. Yep. It was off of my mind is blanking right now. A Discovery episode. My statues, Discovery. Normally it's pretty difficult to find these artifacts or these videos, these pictures, just because it's so hidden. But essentially what came up was, I'd have to go through my pictures and try to find it, but essentially what came up was statues that looked exactly like Greek and Roman statues, right, in these Edomite cities, which the question is, why do they look exactly like Greek and Roman statues? And that's the thing is, the same people once again. So I'm going to give it one more try. Edomite or Petra Jordan statues found. I think it was this right here. Aphrodite statues discovered in Jordan. But this might have been after. Let's see. Archaeology magazine. Says discovered two marble statues representing the goddess Aphrodite or Venus at Petra, the ancient Nabatean capital. Most of the pieces of the Roman-style statues, which date to the 2nd century AD, have been recovered. Right, and they say it's a little bit more recent. Let's see if there's anything else. Petra, Jordan. Let's get another scripture. Just came to mind. Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 1, it says, the vision of Obadiah, thus saith Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Right, so they have that pride. And the key point here is that they dwell in the clefts of the rock, right? Literally, in the clefts of the rock. It says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahweh. Right, and that's going into, their skyscrapers. That's that high habitation, it says in verse 3. And exalting themselves as the eagle. Right, look at every single one of their civilizations, the Edomites, Greek, Romans, Americans now, they always have that eagle. Okay, that's part of their pride. So, I just want to leave it there. Hopefully this is edifying. I couldn't find what I wanted to find, but I think it might be this right here. Alamy. Let's see. Yeah, I think it was this right here. How you look at these statues and they look Greek and Roman, but they're from way, way before any of that. Edomites. They built the same type of statues. So now I'll leave it there. With that, I'll give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Kakudash, and double honors to the elder bishops and apostles of Great Millstone that taught me the truth. Shalom to elect Shalom.